Good morning from Des Moines, Iowa. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Mary Boat, and on behalf of the Global Farmer Network, whom I serve as CEO, I am pleased to welcome you and thank you for joining us for what is the first in a series of webinars focused on cultivating the farmer's voice. We've all experienced a year of unexpected challenges, regardless of where we live, including a need to adapt and learn how to communicate with each other differently. The mission of the Global Farmer Network is to amplify the farmer's voice in promoting trade, technology, sustainable farming, economic growth, and food security. Today, we're bringing together 4 practical farmers from around the globe to have a conversation in this virtual world and talk about their individual farms, the way they are using technology, and the importance of free-flowing trade. You'll have a chance to ask them your questions and hear them discuss with each other how shared challenges like climate change, the desire to support biodiversity and enhance the land they live and farm on, how best to invest the limited natural resources available, and how best to meet the demand to grow enough affordable, nutritious food for everyone while treading very lightly on the world we share, is pushing them to identify technologies and strategies that support their efforts to continually improve what they do, where they live. It is my honor to introduce the 4 farmers who are joining us from their farms today. Paul Temple from the United Kingdom, Annechien of Mellema from the Netherlands, Julio Speroni, who farms and is a rancher in Argentina, and Joanna Lidback, who farms in the United States, joining us from her farm in the state of Vermont. Each of these farmers will be introducing themselves and their farming operations personally by sharing a video with all of us. After we've met all 4 virtually, Paul Temple will set the stage and start the conversation. Do not hesitate to offer your questions to Paul, Annechien, Julio, or Joanna via the chat function. This is your chance to talk directly to a farmer and get their perspective on why a science-based, free-flowing trade system is so important to all of us.
Hi, my name is Paul Temple. I farm in the north of England in the UK. I'm involved in a family farm that's tenanted. We farm suckler cows and beef animals that we produce, that we fatten and sell as stores. And then we have a series of arable crops, wheat that we grow for seed, barley, oilseed rape, vining peas and beans. We've just added grass lays into our arable rotation as we've moved the farm from conventional tillage through to conservation agriculture. So we're now in the steep learning process of practicing no-till in the UK. In addition, the farm's in a higher level environmental scheme, and you can see behind me one of the margins that we've put there. It's a flowering margin and it'll carry seeds into the winter period that we are now, and behind that are the hedgerows that we also have to manage in a scheme that we're involved with, that will be an increasingly important part of our farming as the UK government switches its support away from farming into environmental measures. It's quite an exciting area because we realise that we can actually provide beneficial habitat that will help us manage the inside of the fields. As I mentioned, the UK has just gone through the process of Brexit. We now have a different relationship with the European Union, and hopefully this will allow us an opportunity to use technology on the farm that we haven't been able to do in the past, and we will now enter into a very different trading arrangement. And again, this will be a bit of a steep learning curve, but it's important we look forward and outward to the rest of the world, and that's why I find the Global Farming Network a really useful benefit to me, because it brings practical experience of farming from across the world right in front of me.
I am Annechien Mellema. I have, together with my son Detmer and husband Menno, a pig and cropping farm with biogas. We live in Beerta in the northern part of the Netherlands, and we are near the outdoor pig stable for the hamlet's pigs. We are very proud of being the first Better Life 2 stars producer in the Netherlands. 2 stars Better Life means that pigs can go outside and that they have access to straw and much more space. The pigs can decide if they want to stay inside or outside. On our farm we have a biogas plant. The manure from the pigs goes into the biogas plant and we produce electricity and heat. We deliver more than 5 million kilowatt hours electricity to the grid. The heat of the biogas warms the stables and the digested goes back to the field as feed for our plants. We feed our pigs with grain and lupins from our own fields, and so is the cycle closed. We traveled a lot to learn from other farmers. In New Zealand, we visited a farmer who has his own brand and sells to supermarkets. I learned about selling and pricing. In Brazil, I visited a corn farmer looking for added value. This corn farmer was a front runner and showed the way to the future. In Canada, I visited farmers with a lot of small market concepts. The worldwide network of farmers is very important to us, and so is the Global Farmers Network, because it gives access to the world of agriculture, and we are very happy with that.
My name is Julius Peroni. I'm a farmer from Argentina, from the province of Entre Rios. We farm about 4,500 acres of land where we raise Angus and Hereford cattle. Basically, we have about 1,000 cows and we produce 800 to 850 steers on the open range. We also plant corn, soybeans, sorghum, ryegrass, using non-till agricultural techniques, and we are deep believers on good animal welfare techniques.
Good morning. Well, this is what farmers do. This is a cow. It wasn't able to give birth to its calf. It's under pain. He has a fever. We just vaccinated according to the veterinary specs, and now we are waiting for her to get strong and to be able to stand up again. We love our animals and we take great care of them. Back are 300 kilogram steers. They gain about 800 grams a day, basically on ryegrasses. Today we're giving it out bales to the cows. This time of the year, when the season is getting dry, it is key important to give out bales to the cows in order for them to have good welfare. The Argentine gaucho, the American cowboy, the Australian drover. We're all the same people.
Hi, I'm Joanna Lidback. I'm a dairy farmer, a CFO, a business consultant, a mom, and a wife. Dairy is my life. My husband and I own and operate the farm at Wheeler Mountain, which is a 70-cow herd of Holsteins and Jerseys. In the temperate months, we graze our cattle in the beautiful rolling hills of the Northeast Kingdom here in Vermont. Our milk goes to Cabot Creamery, where it's made into cheese, butter, and other cultured dairy products. We also raise our own replacement heifers, and we also have a few steers hanging around here that we process and sell for local beef. The majority of our forages are grass-based. We work with a nutritionist to provide the best nutrition for our dairy cows. At 80K Farms, I am the CFO. Our vision is to be a key contributor to a sustainably nourished planet. We take care of over 5,000 dairy cows, and we steward over 8,000 acres of land. I can say with complete confidence that farmers of all different types of operations have lots of shared values. One that we have in the dairy industry is if you take care of the cows, they'll take care of you. And I've always found that to be true.
Okay, hi everyone. It's great to see you. You've all met us now and seen a little bit about our farming. It is fantastic to see how many participants we've got signed up for this, and quite incredible to think that there are 47 countries effectively covered in this. So a big welcome to you in whatever time zone you're in and whatever climate you're working with. I just want to point out at the beginning, we are recording this. This is a new concept. We're building on virtual communications that I suppose, tools that we've been learning through the year. I couldn't have imagined anything like this 12 months ago. Our goal is quite simple. It's to introduce and bring a global community of farmers to a larger audience so that they can share their immediate perspectives and you can all ask them questions yourself. So it is going to be very much a conversation. I'm going to break it down into sort of 3 sessions, and I'm going to encourage questions in via the chat feature. If you don't get your question answered, we will attempt to follow those questions up and get an answer to you. I want to point out that this is aimed to be a positive experience. This is about our own experiences and our outlook, and particularly in ending some of the myths that we work with. So that's what we're going to start off in our first session, the myths in the farming space that we're all trying to operate in. And I particularly see it from an EU perspective, and now increasingly from a Brexit perspective. So let's start this conversation, and I'm going to go straight over to Joanna for a start off. Joanna, we often hear that US food is not safe. You just tell us a little bit about the reality and how you ensure the safety of your produce.
All right, thanks, Paul. What a question to start off with. Boy, the idea that U.S. food would not be safe when we have the safest food supply in all of history is kind of wild to me. But to offer some perspective in what we do to ensure the safety is there's a lot of steps to it. And the overriding umbrella is if for some reason something happens and you're discovered to be a bad apple, you risk the opportunity to pursue your livelihood and to pursue what it is that you love. Because let's face it, farming is a vocation of passion and love, and not you don't get rich farming, and so we want to make sure that we're doing it in the best way possible. So, for example, there are certain tests and things that we do here right on the farm. We're regulated at the local level, regionally for certain things, as well as the state. We belong to a dairy cooperative that is constantly testing and measuring our milk for various, whether it's contaminants or levels of different pathogens that might be in there. And consistently, we always fall under certain limits, and we're actually also incentivized to make sure that we keep those things down, whether it's a somatic cell count in milk or whatever that case may be. That's what I would say there.
No, that's fine. I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize how much detail goes into every farming situation. Now, Julio, you're a big exporter from an exporting country. What do you have to go through to ensure that your food's safe and gets onto the export market?
Well, Paul, hello, everybody. As you just mentioned, we are basically net exporters of meat, grain, and what we do in our farm, we are basically permanently managing the environment. We produce naturally under prairie grass with cows, and we do all kinds of non-till crops in order to feed those cows. And just as Joanna, Annechien, and yourself, we all manage under federal, local, and provincial regulations, which we must follow. And as farmers, we're always looking to get the best out of our crops in a sustainable way by using basically non-till agriculture, green label chemicals. And we are really compromised with this because we are in here for the long run. It's no good business for a farmer to hurt their soil or their cows because
next year you won't have it, or you won't have it available as you need it. So we take great concern and great care of our land, our people, and our animals.
No, that's fine. And Annechien, you know, we often hear EU food is safer than anybody else's, but is that really true? And I mean, you've travelled around the world to sort of understand that it, you know, we all suffer from regulation. How do you see that myth?
Yeah, well, all around the world, I see farmers doing their best to produce, to get a good yield and try to produce safe products and take good care of their animals. But what I see in the northwest of Europe is a strong influence of societal demands. So consumer demands are very strong. And not everywhere in the world you have those same standards. So sometimes that is a problem, but I think transparency is very important for this. And on our farm, we are having a system to control the production chain. We have audits on the farm by supermarkets or maybe sometimes by external auditors. Sometimes they are unannounced checks by auditors, but I think that's not very specific only for the Netherlands, but just for Europe it is, of course. But you can see it all over the world because I visited a farm in Brazil and they had waste separation, a shower for accidents, and I know we can learn a lot from that farm because I was very impressed about what I saw. So yeah, it's not very clear.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that as you're fortunate to travel and see how the world is actually one global, that the responsibility for safe food actually exists in every single country. And I can remember a group of English farmers went to Egypt and were mesmerized by the standards that the Egyptian farmers to supply potatoes in the out of season period were having to go through. And I think what it really highlighted to me was the importance of conversations with other people to actually ensure we have the right awareness of what is actually happening rather than the myths. And so we'll move into the next myth. And that is the environment. And we are all aware now increasingly of our environmental responsibility in probably a way that we weren't 10 years ago. It's often said from my side of the world that it is effectively produced in a better environment than, for argument's sake, South America. Julio, can you add your perspective on actually how seriously you take managing the environment? And you're on mute, Julio.
Sorry. All around the world, and Argentina is not an exception, South America either, the weather is getting truly extreme. I mean, we go from strong droughts to flooding just like that in the same season. So basically, the environment is telling us something through those acts. And in the last 5 years, I think that all of South America made a huge switch into taking that into account and taking much more serious environmental situations and how we should be producing our farms. What I'm impressed about it is that my grandpa, my father, they were, keen farmers and they do cultural things. And us younger farmers, we are totally changing the way they used to produce. We are adapting quickly to technology, and we are really keen about using that technology in order to reduce yield losses, reduce water dumping, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm excited about it because young people, about under 40, put it that way, they finally taking this into account, and all the technology available around us is helping a lot. So this process is finally kicking in all of South America very positively.
It from a farmer's perspective that the environment is telling us something. I think that sums up how the relationship farmers have with their landscape. Annechien, how do you see it from your perspective? You know, and just outline some of the environmental challenges you actually face.
Yes, well, in the Netherlands, we face a lot of environmental challenges because we have a lot of animals and a lot of people. So we have a lot of discussions about that, about nitrogen, how much nitrogen we can produce, can put on a hectare. So, but it's also driven by EU legislation, and sometimes EU protectionism is mostly a point of consumer concerns. And what I think is that we cannot ignore consumer concerns because we as farmers must respond to this. And this is also that I think what's asked from our consumers to the rest of farmers from all over the world, to fulfill their concerns and expectations. So, well, I have an example. For instance, in the EU, in the pig meat, in the pork industry, lactopamine is not. We are not able to use that. And then you see, for instance, in Canada, that there are special production, special lines that with the production of pork without using ractopamine. So they make a special line going to Europe so they can fulfill the things the industry asks. And I think that's a good thing. And mostly they get also a good price for that if there is enough demand. So what I call this is a diversification of the production. So it's not one size fits all, but you have different differentiation in production. And mostly the differentiation in production is better for the farmer because when you can control how much you produce and how much you can sell, mostly you get a better price. Yeah, so that's but sure, we are having big environmental discussions in the Netherlands. So we had also farmers going with tractors on the street, and the discussion is not finished yet.
Yeah, because I think some of the environmental pressure in the Netherlands has resulted from some dairy herds having to cut their numbers down. Is that right?
Yeah, we have all quotations for our animals. It's not all called the same quota, but you have a kind of quota for dairy production, but we have also have this for chicken, and we have this for pork, pigs. So we have all kind of limitation to our production. So I think we will not expand the production anymore. Maybe in cropping that you have a better yield, but for animals, we are not able to expand our production anymore. Even more, it will go down because government takes some production out and pays farmers to stop with their farm.
Yeah, and Joanna, I mean, you manage both sides of farming scale, but you know in your rolling landscape, you'll obviously have some environmental restrictions, no doubt. You know, how does it impact on you, and will the new administration affect you?
Good question, Paul. So specifically here in Vermont, I'm happy to share that you know, I think we've done a lot to step up to certain challenges that have been placed upon us. With respect, in particular, our priority here has been water quality, and how we as farmers can step up to the plate and try to reduce phosphorus loads that are going into our local watersheds. And what we've done, if there's one thing I'm trying to start to do, is to dispel the
anxiety that comes with the term CAFO, because my small 70 cow dairy is now a certified, essentially CAFO, which is a good thing. I think we've got all the the proper records. We're measuring exactly what is coming out of our cows and going onto our fields. And previously, it had just fallen on the backs of large farms to keep the type of records and make available the type of records that we're all having to do now. And to tie that to the new administration, there's certainly lots of talk about what they're going to bring to the table, and certainly they've made it clear that climate change is a priority to them in terms of fighting. I'm not sure what to fight, but really I think the emphasis should be on adapting and changing with the times and trying to reduce our, as we have been and we have been doing, we've been successful at reducing our impact. The dairy industry itself has a big push to be a net zero carbon emissions by a certain time frame, 2050, I believe, and I believe that there's many of us who are already there. So certainly, as when we talk about sustainability, the environmental piece is huge with respect to, if you think about sustainability as a three-legged stool, but it's also it goes hand in hand with our responsibility to our community and to our country and to our community as farmers as well.
I think that's a really good point. That responsibility that farmers inherently have, both to the local community and the long-term environment, is sort of missed out of the equation. And I think you made a really good point about putting some science and data into the way we manage the environment. Too often, it's dealt with on a sort of a subjective basis rather than more of an objective basis. And from a European perspective, and especially from a UK perspective, having left the European Union, we will have more emphasis on how we manage the environment. And in a way, the phraseology is public money for public goods. So that shift of support, which is currently in the process of design, will be about supporting the environment. And in many ways, that can be, particularly in what I would call marginal areas of production. So I was always aware from a European perspective that they often saw food security as lying not in the more natural areas of productive farming, but in the marginal areas. And getting that balance right is really important. I think there's some really good news in this area when it comes to the environment. I mean, there's a report this week that got put out into the media that actually farmers are trusted with the environment and they're seen as caring. I think that's down to an awful lot of work by a lot of farmers, and I actually do think this medium of virtual communication and social media has allowed us to get life stories out there. So we've covered off a bit of the farming, and we've covered a bit off of some of the environmental sides. One of the next myths that materialize, and I'm going to start off with this one, is consumers don't want US food, which is what we tend to hear a lot of, and I know is echoed in Europe. It's one of my biggest areas of frustration, and particularly when you have aspects like chlorinated chicken. What they're doing is drawing emotional arguments into something that bears no sense of reality in it in many ways. And Ted McKinney put it very neatly last February. There aren't any exporters in the US exporting chlorinated chicken, and yet it seems to be such a big issue. So it sort of highlights to me the challenge that we all have of getting across the fact, and it's been mentioned earlier, that food wherever is going to be safe, because retailers and food service and restaurants are not going to serve anything that isn't actually safe. So from that perspective, and I'm going to come back to you, Joanna, how do you see this whole issue of food and how it's viewed?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we certainly have to. So, uh, Annechien mentioned earlier that we've got, societal demands placed upon us, and these ideas that are born there that maybe have no basis in fact or very little basis in fact. That now all of a sudden, the 1% of us who are responsible in the U.S. anyway for the, the as far as population goes for producing the food that we consume and that we export, it falls on us. To try to get information and good information out there. And I think that there's that saying that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. In my video, I talk about the old adage being, if you take care of the cows, they take care of you. That's true with about most anything. The environment, the cows, our people that we work with. And so where our underlying value is providing the best care, right? For, like I said, the land, the cows, the people. And when we find new tools and new opportunities to make that possible, especially when they nicely marry together. For example, if we were to use, either whether you look at it as a growth promoting hormone or a disease resistant hormone, does the same thing, and it lowers the carbon footprint. It keeps the animal healthier, and at the end of the day, you have a better product. But there are so many myths around hormones in food that people have just sort of confused the fact that hormones are in everything, right? And so, it's a tall task to try to attempt to peck away at that misguided, myth that it's somehow bad. But at the end of the day, the consumer is our boss. And so, whether that, it's not that I want to educate consumers, it's that I want to engage them. I want them to see, how I operate, how we operate, what we do, why we make the choices we do. Another one in dairy that we sometimes come across is separating the calf from her cow, from her dam. And why do we do that? Yeah. Well, we do that to offer the best care to both the mama and the calf, which I believe is the same value that consumers have for those animals, is so that they get the best care.
I mean, absolutely. And Julio, your video neatly showed to me the backdrop of your production. Do you think, consumers are aware across the world, effectively, they're coming from one of the most natural backdrops of production there actually is?
Well, Paul, I think that us as farmers globally, we haven't done a very good job showing how we produce our food or how we manage our animals, how we raise our crops. I mean, overall, I think we are behind on that topic. I mean, we are improving. Technology is helping out to reach out to the farms and put the cell phones everywhere where we do our work. But I think we're finally catching up with that. People, urban people in general, don't really understand how to produce our cycles, how long they are. They don't realize how committed as farmers we are with the daily operation. We wake up, run early before dawn. I mean, we do 12, 15 hours daily for months, especially when things don't come good, when you have floods, when you have ice, when you have snow. But I mean, it's great that we are realizing this. This platform really helps out for us to show out how we do our work, how we care about our own production. And it really shows how it's a really heavy responsibility on us farmers that we have on our shoulders to put the food on the table after all this is over. So I think we are improving in showing out people. We still have a lot to walk through that path. And I hope people get interested, and before perhaps saying farmers are this or that, they will know a little bit more about us. And I know that we are not easy to come around people because we're always in the middle of nowhere by ourselves. And we are not out there. We should be more out there. That's what I mean.
Well, that's a really good point, and that picks up one of the questions. But I'm going to go and mention, there's a question that's come in from Andrew Osmond. I don't know whether you can actually see it. And he's talking about the consumer insight that's continually thrown at us. How do we influence the influencers on consumer insight? How do we get them to understand, the safety of all our food, whether it's US, South American, Brazil, and so it goes on?
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, I think you have to tell your story and be on social media, because that's very easy to, you have easy access to consumers, or you try to find an influencer who wants to tell about your story. So or you invest it yourself. So, but when you are on Facebook or TikTok or whatever, or Instagram, and yeah, share your story. That's what we are doing on our farm. We are posting 2 or 3 times a week a post on Facebook, or a post and together a post on Instagram, and that's how we are trying to get a community and people who are involved in our farm, and tell our story and share our messages and posts. It is not easy, but with all these things, farmers have more instruments to talk to the world and to their own consumers and try to build up your own community. But you have to invest in it. And you have to also do work for your animals and on the farm and all those things. You also have to do them. So it's not easy. You have to be involved in that. All day when you are awake, you have to work on that.
I think it's particularly, I think the younger generation have a more open mind as to attracting people onto farms and showing it in a way that we maybe didn't do 20 years ago. When I've been asked by farmers, what can I do? I've always said, look, it's really simple. Just ask people on the farm, tell them their story, and they'll love it. And they genuinely do. Now, there's a question I think it's relevant to where we are at the moment. I'm going to give this to Joanna because it seems particularly tied in. Katie Lee is asking, should farmers respond to campaigns that try to play different agricultural products against each other? And gives the example of oat milk versus dairy milk. So obviously this is something relevant to you. How do you deal with that kind of thing?
I think the fact is that we have so many people in this world, and that the choice is a wonderful thing that we have the opportunity to provide. I would caution farmers not to play into the pitting of one group against one another, because at the end of the day, we're all farmers. In fact, I would love to see, and I think that this is out there, but as a former mom who was a breastfeeding mom, I would love to see an oat dairy milk combination, because of the promotion that to help with milk supply, and that's always a big worry for moms who are breastfeeding, that sort of thing. But it's also such a wonderful combination of nutritional benefits. And at the end of the day, that's what we're about. That's is to get the best nutrition out there and make it available for people, all people. So I myself, at one point got pulled into some fights that pitted farmer against farmer. And like I said, at the end of the day, we're all farmers, and we've got a growing global population. And in order to meet the challenge of feeding everyone, we're going to need as many farmers as we can, whether they grow oats, whether they're organic, whether they're conventional, whether they have dairy cows or beef cows, whether they're in South America and the UK, and here in little tiny Vermont. We're all needed, and we're all important.
Absolutely. And Annechien, I think it was another point you wanted to make.
Yeah, I'd like to add something, because when you know the power of social media, we have also, sometimes we have a kind of contest, I don't know the real name, but then when people who are on Facebook make a picture of the product and tell about it, and then once a week we have a winner. And we ask them to our farm in the before COVID period. They come to our farm and visit our farm. And then what I see back is that those people are the best ambassadors of our products. So they tell the story, they share stories, and they are very involved. They are always there. They are, the most likes come from them. So it's very nice to see how you can involve consumers in farming, and I think that's everywhere in the world, and it's nice to look around and see other farmers doing this.
Absolutely. There's a good question, actually, I think that's particularly relevant to you, Julio. Christy Dixon's asking, how can global agribusiness, who are usually more in urban centres, help bridge the gap between farmers and consumers? You mentioned you're a long way from nowhere. Increasingly, we are seeing people living in a more urban environment. How can the ag business help bridge that gap?
Well, that's a great question. I think as farmers, and we're working on this through different organizations, rural associations and stuff. I think we should get into the schools, into the grade schools. We should have talks, and they are being carried on as we speak right now. I think we should center on the children first, then on the parents, and we should walk into the schools. This is what we're doing, and this is where the focus is put behind all the all the politics behind it. But farmers, it really helps out. I did 4 or 5 of these experiences, going just into an urban school and tell them how we produce, how we do it, how we manage cattle, how we treat the land, explaining the cycles of agriculture. I mean, these guys just don't know how food is produced or how food is put on their table. They just have no idea, which it's awesome to see the eyes of those kids understanding the cycle, understanding how weather plays a key role on the yields they will get and the final production. And this helps out bridging with them in order for them to understand when floods come in, or when there's hay, or when there's problems in the weather. They connect that, okay, if our end, and it's a connection that they don't did before. We have that chat. I mean, they just think that food is out there, it's produced by whoever. And that, I mean, a big plan of
are we freezing out of Julio? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question that I just want to ask in this session, and it's probably one of the bigger myths, and it's important that we actually talk about it. Is technology actually harmful? Now, I think I learned a lot about this. I took part in the UK government's field scale evaluation trials for GM crops. I was a farmer who wanted to learn, didn't know anything about the technology. And then by actually using it myself, I realized how important this technology was. And then in subsequent work, I realized the danger of the myths perpetuating around the use of this technology. I'm going to come to Joanna. You know, the US leads the world genuinely in technology for all the right reasons, because, you know, that challenge is to produce more from less and to effectively help in our environmental management. How do you see this? How do we actually talk a positive case for using technology and counter the harmful argument?
It's another tall task ahead of us, Paul. But I think again, you know, you start with the why, right? You start with, you know, what's the underlying value? What's the driver? Why are you choosing whether your business model is 5,000 cows or 70 cows? You know, to drive up to my farm, it probably doesn't look like we employ a whole lot of technology. But the reality is we are using whatever technology is available to us, given our, you know, capital structure and that sort of thing, if I want to get technical and talk business terms, you know, and whether that's in identifying an organism that might be causing mastitis or an illness, or whether that's measuring the level of fat and protein in the milk, or whether or not, you know, we can test milk now to see whether a cow is carrying a calf or not, and that's, you know, that's been a huge benefit to understanding what's going on with our cows, and so, you know, it's easy for us as farmers to be sometimes it's easy, I should say, to grasp technology. We see it firsthand. We see the benefits firsthand. And sometimes even if you've sat out long enough, you get to jump right into, you know, kind of skip a few levels, if you will, and you get to jump right in and use some. I like to, so we live in a pretty rural area, and we kind of, you know, we have broadband internet. We have better internet than my folks do, who live 30 minutes outside a city down in Massachusetts. And that's, you know, in part because we skipped, you know, certain types of internet providers, services, and we went right to broadband, which was a big push from our governor at the time. And so that's also been a huge help with respect to just keeping up. Records keeping is huge, and communication is huge. Obviously, I'm here today without incident, knock on wood, and so that's huge. But there's always sort of this fear of the unknown, and, you know, what may be this fear of breaking things, that old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing, when the reality is, you know, there may be technology out there that helps us to do, you know, what we do even better than we already do it today, and to take on a mindset of to be a lifelong learner, and to always want to improve. I grew up in the 4-H program, and their motto is to make the best better. And, you know, I kind of carry that with me today, to strive to be the best, but to always know that you can always be improving.
Yeah, that's a great mantra. Now, Annechien, I mean, you use technology in your farming, but I think, as was mentioned, you're producing biogas as well, which is employing technology. You know, just how important is the use of it on your farm? And you're on mute.
I'm on mute. Technology makes life easier for the farmer, and it's important to us because, yeah, on our biogas plant, well, it's a natural process, but you have the engines, and there's a lot of on the process of the biogas. You have to control it. But on the farm, on the big farm, you are having automatic feeding. We have a machine who goes automatically, puts the straw in the barn, and yeah, it saves costs, and mostly it makes you get better technical results. On the cropping, you have GPS. It saves fuel. So we have scrapers under the slatted floor, and it reduces ammonia. And the manure goes direct into the biogas, and then you have more yield for the gas. but we have also air washes on some parts of our farm. The air is washed and it reduces also ammonia. And the biogas is reducing methane. So that's also important. But you can also think about technology and techniques like gene editing. We are not allowed to do that, but CRISPR-Cas is also a technique like that, and we are not allowed to do that at the moment. But I see some perspective ways of using it. For instance, for the discussion about castration of piglets, of the male piglets, it is painful, and we want to avoid it. And if we could breed more females than males, we would solve the problem. And if we could reach that by CRISPR-Cas, it would be very good. But yeah, so it's controversial in our country, in the EU, I think. But they are working on it, and I see good perspectives for that.
And Julio, now in employing technology over the last 10 years, how much benefit are you seeing on your farm for employing technology?
Oh, great question. Huge benefits. Just like Annechien says, the using of GPS technology save us tons of diesel. It saves us tons of possible harmful to our employees because they are not on the field when they don't have to be. And we are applying the right chemicals when we have them, and we are applying them on the right amounts, right kind of way. And basically, technology. Precision farming made a huge change in farming. Huge. I mean, each one working blindly, to tell you the truth. I mean, we're doing everything manually.
We might have lost Julio again, have we? We have, unfortunately, the joys of technology when you're coming to conversations. I'm going to pick up a question by Amy Richardson, and I think it's relevant to here. She asks, do I participate in hashtag Farm24, which is on social media? Do I support this type of farmer-driven education for consumers? Absolutely. I think these are the great opportunities for farmers to reach much wider audiences, put it right in front of them, exactly what we're doing, and this use of technology is something that we can definitely put in front of them using Farm24, Amy. Right, well, we're eating through our time remarkably quickly. I want to move into the next session. It's a short session, and what I want to ask the panelists is their personal view for the year, the trade situation, benefits of global markets, and particularly the commonalities of farming across the world. Now let's just start with markets, because it's quite a different this year. For many key commodities, we're watching both the harvest down in South America, in the Southern Hemisphere, and we certainly will be watching spring weather in the Northern Hemisphere. Julio, what's your perspective on the markets at the moment?
Well, Paul, market is kind of weird this year. I mean, all of the Southern Hemisphere, we suffer a huge drop. So soybeans, corn, sorghum prices are awful high. When prices are high, production is low. I mean, it's just as simple as that. As farmers, we actually prefer decent yields with decent prices. I mean, this kind of situation when we have high prices with low yields, it definitely doesn't cover margin needs. But we'll see how it advances. I mean, the early season was awful dry. It finally rained last week all over South America, basically Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay. So we are hoping that it wasn't late enough or have decent crops or decent yield from those crops, and they are not decent, prices will still go up. And I actually do not like high prices overall, because when you have high prices, you have low production. That's like a gold rule, basically.
Yeah, and Annechien, you know, we've seen obviously the price of soya is rising. Is this affecting your feed prices? And obviously with African swine fever now in Germany, is that affecting your marketing? How are you viewing the market at the moment?
Yeah, it all affects our markets. Mostly the African swine fever in Germany and the eastern part of Europe. We have a lot of heavy pigs that can't be slaughtered, and now we are trying to slaughter more, but it was a problem together with the COVID-19. So we had workers in slaughterhouses also infected by COVID-19. So we had less workers, and yeah, so we had problems to get all the pigs slaughtered. But we are now running in and hope to get that we will go to normal slaughter weights. And about our feeding price for the pigs and other animals is rising, because we depend on the world markets, so we have to deal with world market prices. So if the price of soy and other things go up, it affects our markets. Yeah, so that's important to us.
And Joanna, I mean, obviously you're seeing markets from both your co-op cheese production size and the large size. You know, how are you seeing the markets, and has the COVID-19 situation created any interesting marketing quirks that you can build on?
That's a great question. Certainly, we can say we know a whole lot more today than we did 9 months ago when we entered the lockdown related to the COVID-19 pandemic. I think that we've discovered that people have rediscovered the joy of cooking at home, and our co-op has been able to capitalize on that with respect to cheese sales, butter sales. We've done. They've done the folks at the manufacturing plant have just really done a fantastic job of figuring out what the rules were, what the limitations were with respect to keeping everyone safe first and foremost, and being able to work within that space. Certainly the U.S. has, even our small co-op has some international customers that we take care of, and we've done our best to keep up with the changing landscape there with respect to making sure that the orders are filled and that sort of thing, and again working within that scope. And then as far as prices in general, I mean, we all kind of play off the same markets, and which are, global markets essentially. And so it is hard to kind of look out very far with respect to milk prices in the U.S. I don't want to date myself, but I do go back to a time when we could set the price for the year and pretty much come within pennies for it with it, and go from there. That's just not the case anymore. And so along with the changes in the markets, we've got these new risk management tools that we can try to capitalize on and purchase and that sort of thing, to alleviate some of those peaks and valleys. But otherwise, it's still, I think most of us are cautiously optimistic that there are more than just the one that I mentioned as far as what to build on from what we've learned during this wild time.
Yeah, I certainly think it's been a real period of learning in terms of supply chains over the coronavirus period. I think the retailing supply chain did a remarkable job through all the disruption. But what it seems to have done is connected a lot more people to their local suppliers than they had done in the past, which I think is really good news. But in many ways, it's also highlighted the vulnerability of our supply chains, which hopefully politicians will be slightly more aware of when you have disruptions. From a UK perspective, I have to say it was a huge relief to finally have a deal with the European Union because they are our biggest trading partner, so to speak. So we didn't have tariffs being applied as such. What we have, though, seen a number of non-tariff barriers that have come into equation, and those can often have a significant effect. And unfortunately, they can often affect small producers. So particularly for people wanting to put small amounts into another country, the paperwork burden now putting that into Europe has changed significantly. And it is disappointing to see effectively penalising some of the smaller producers out there. I do, however, share that cautious optimism of Joanna, because the backdrop of supply is very different to where we were 12 months ago. So from that forward vision of the markets, we will just have a quick whip round to sort of see what view you have of politics. I don't want to get into detail, but to maybe just touch on some of the biggest issues that you actually face. I'm going to bring in Julio. It's good to see you back on screen again. I know you have your problems. Julio, just give us a flavour of sort of the effects of politics, particularly in reaching your markets.
Okay, Paul, thank you. Well, Argentine farmers and politics, we haven't been talking the same language for the last few years now. The way I see it is that as farmers, we haven't done a good job informing politics how important our production is. But we're working on it. And we are finally grasping how to get politics interested in us and how we can have politics work for us more favorably. Did you hear me fine?
Yeah, no, yes, we can hear you fine. That's good. Thank you very much. I'm just going to pick up a couple of questions if I can find them. One is from, and please forgive me if I don't get the pronunciation correct, Jose Luis Gonzalez asked, is there an international certification that helps us prove that our farms are eco-friendly? And at the same time, there's a question that I'm going to pick up from Richard Whitlock in England, who asks, do other farmers have on-farm audits for sustainability and safe food? And Annechien, you have a system of auditing for your pigs, don't you?
Yes, we do. But I know there is also a global gap certification, and that global gap is trying to have the certification all over the world. And I know that at least from the Netherlands, we are trying to get such a system that works for all over the world. So I think it's work in progress. Yeah,
do you have to pay for that audit, Annechien?
Yeah, we pay for the audit. Yes, we do. Well, when there is an unexpected audit, yeah, we also pay. But when supermarkets are coming for an audit to the farm, they pay themselves. So you just have to be there, and you have spent your time to show them around and show your papers. But the normal inspections, audits, they are once a year, and you have to pay for that. Yeah.
Yeah. And Joanna, do you have audits or certifications that you as a farming business have to pay for?
Yes. Yes, we have certifications, and yes, we pay for them, but not necessarily for the certificate itself, but for maybe the requirements that lead up to them. So we have the FARM program through our dairy cooperative. So all of our fellow farms in our cooperative aspire to and achieve a certain level of management practices. FARM stands for Farmers Assuring Responsible Management, and they cover the gamut from animal health to cleanliness to environmental questions, as well as certainly we have our state certificate process to make sure that we're producing in a clean area, clean space, that we have the proper water temperatures and everything else. And those are multi-year inspections. FARM is an inspection. So those are two examples. There are other third-party audits that various brands or direct-facing, consumer-facing farms can apply for. There's an animal welfare certification, certified humane certification that you can go for. And actually, I would also mention Cabot, which is our co-op, is a B corporation, which also there's a stringent set of requirements that you have to meet that, again, kind of cover a wide variety of areas to ensure that we're doing our part when it comes to different things like the environment and treating our workers well and that sort of thing.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, it's interesting. I think there are these schemes. The UK has several schemes. As an English farmer, I have a scheme called Red Tractor, where I pay to have the various sectors of my farms audited to provide assurance for the supply chain. It's been in practice for a number of years now. It can cause a bit of frustration on occasions, but we've sort of got used to the process, and in many ways, if you've got good practice, then it isn't an issue. Julio, hopefully you're with us again. Do you have to produce any form of certification of the standards that you're farming to?
Well, here in Argentina, we have all the worldwide certifications. I mean, organic agriculture, good agricultural practices, sustainability certifications, biofuel and biomass, forestry, water quality. We have them all. Farmers are slowly switching into these kind of certifications because they see a value added. They can basically evidence to third parties, to neighbors, to consumers how they produce. And all these certifications have in common that they control key factors of production, how much fertilizer you put, how much water runoff you have. So this is something that is growing in Argentina, basically because our world customers, they are demanding them more year after year. So I see farmers switching into this slowly but steadily.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're now going to move on to the what I call the opportunities that we can provide, not just for food but for society as well. I don't think there's a bigger issue than climate change at the moment, and we've got a couple of questions here, so I'm going to read them both and then allow you to just sort of give your views. I've got one from Stig Borson, who asks, standards such as carbon footprint sustainability, how can the actual science be included? And then there's another question from Neil Wilson, who asks, with COP26 being hosted in Glasgow, Scotland this year, what messages should farmers be trying to get across? What is being classed as the most important climate summit? So basically, this is, what our role is, what you can see down on a farm level, and the role that we can play as an opportunity in carbon. Annechien, what are your views? I mean, you're producing biogas, so I mean you're doing a really good job.
Yes, well, I think it's important to have a standardization of the how you make the carbon footprint, because there are different definitions and different arithmetics. So it's good that we have a worldwide standard how we make the carbon footprint. I think that's also important because when we are not doing it in the same way, you can't compare it. And well, I think that's necessary so that we have a worldwide standard for that.
I think that's a really good point, is the worldwide standards, and I think a lot of that kind of thinking. Joanna, I mean, you obviously are looking at carbon footprints quite closely. You've mentioned in the past, you know, your larger herd is a reasonably good footprint. Where do you sit with this whole area, and what sort of targets and ambitions can you see for it in your area of business?
Good question. So I think, you know, what I keep coming back to is, where are we at now? I don't know that we have a great grasp as far as carbon emissions go. You know, we have my small farm here in Vermont, where we graze our cattle. We're a closed system where we return manure to our fields. And then at the farm where I work in New York, we have a methane digester, and we use manure solids for bedding. You know, it's fairly closed as well. Two very different models, and we both, I think, are doing a great job with respect to carbon emissions. But as far as the specifics in measuring, you know, what it is, you know, I would love to be able to get to that point with respect to being specific about the science and the measurements. But certainly, you know, I think there's opportunity in quantifying those things, and I think it also helps us to tell the story of what we have been doing, what we are doing, and what we hope to do as well with respect to stepping up and doing our part with respect to climate change.
I mean, Julio, you know, you've got a lot of grazing cattle. There's a lot of conflicting sort of noise surrounding livestock out there. Ironically, a lot of people would now argue that properly managed natural grassland can be used as a carbon sink. How are you viewing this whole area as a practical farmer?
Well, it's a big issue. I mean, basically the focus is put on feedlot, where they basically have huge concentrations of steer in small spaces, and those are all the eyes are put on those. As you mentioned, as you could see on my videos, we produce on the open range. Quite a bit of the farm is marginal land, so there's definitely, our carbon print is low because we produce with small amount of these steers and cows over large amounts of hectares or acres. So the balance is definitely positive there. But I see the concern on large commercial feedlots. And I know, just like Annechien is doing, and our National Feedlot Association is truly working on this and is truly doing a great job on certification regarding this print, and they're working to reduce it. And now the issue is on the table, which is a great beginning.
Yeah. Now, I suppose in many ways, this brings me on to the next question I want to ask you. Genetics is a key aspect of technology that can sort of help in this area. How do you see genetics and the application of it playing out both with plants and animals in the future? Annechien, obviously with your pigs, genetics are absolutely key and vital. Where do you see this, and is this a real opportunity to take some next steps, so to speak?
I don't know. I'm not sure about that. Well, on our farm, we are not going to do that because we have a special race and special production. So it's not so efficient because it's more intermuscular fat. So, but it's more tasty, and we do it for a specific market. So. on our farm, and on our farm, it's also very important that we take care of the animal, but that we don't touch it in its integrity. So that's a very important thing. And when you do something with genetics, yeah, I think it will be controversial in Europe. It's not easy to do it. But when you have GMOs, like you feed to your animals, it's strange that in Europe we can't use or we can't produce with some varieties that are with GMOs, but we are allowed to import them and feed them to our animals. So that's very strange, and I think if you are not allowed to produce it, you shouldn't import it. So it's for the farmers, it's not acceptable. It's whether you import it and your farmers are also allowed to produce it, or you forbid it and we don't produce it and you don't import it. So, yeah. But from farmers' perspective, it's not a real level playing field. So we always arguing with Brussels about that. But you are free from it also. but I that in the UK, consumers and society is also has a very strong influence. So I don't know what's going on there.
I don't want to get drawn into Brexit because I'm looking for opportunities, really. But I do, as an opportunity, actually, we have, a real willingness to have a more open discussion about gene editing, and I genuinely think. Since COVID-19 and the requirement for the vaccines that have been produced so amazingly quickly using gene editing, it actually has helped us have a conversation. So, on that basis, Joanna, what kind of conversations do you need to have surrounding gene editing, both in plants and animals in the US? And I see they've just put the legislation, I think, or the responsibility into the USDA now.
I mean, again, I think, farmers see benefits firsthand from technology. And certainly, I almost, for a farmer, whether a seed was created via gene editing or traditional breeding, it's almost secondary. They're looking at the traits. They're looking at, they want to get the best seed possible that matches up with the land and the resources that they have available to them. So, on my little farm, we are considering growing corn for silage this year. And we live in northern Vermont, so we need a very specific set of traits in a corn seed if we were to go that route. And I think, you have had these kind of warring factors with respect to overseeing the implementation and the adoption and adaptation to gene editing and what the possibilities are. And so yes, it's we're glad to see it all be with the USDA now. And as far as animals too, I mean, genetics is one of the funner parts of being a farmer, and picking out bulls and developing cow families. And I have a few groups of polled dairy cattle, and you have the opportunity there to get a homozygous polled cattle. Not to get into too much detail here, but and if you get that sort of holy grail type animal, all of her offspring are going to be polled. And if that, would be the case, then that opens up opportunities where you might, look into embryo transfer and, harvesting her eggs and putting them in other ones. But I'm kind of getting off track. But, gene editing now offers the opportunity to speed up that process potentially and take some of the guesswork and the risk out of it. I've had the many opportunities to have a homozygous polled individual, and I've never had one myself. So,
right. Well, I'm going to effectively, and this will neatly fit with Julio. I have a lightning question for each of you. If you were in charge of your government's agriculture R&D budget, what would your top priority be? And Julio, what would yours be?
Oh, great responsibility there, Paul. Well, I will definitely, if I was in charge of my R&D government budget, I will put some bullets into drought-resistant crops for sure, because that's a technology which is actually available. It just needs more R&D precisely in order to be commercial, and it will make a huge difference. I mean, as weather goes crazy worldwide, I mean, the rains are usually getting late when you still have chances for production, and it will have that little gap of 45, 50 days, 30 days that the crop will resist drought. It will make a huge difference in production. So I will definitely put it on that.
Annechien, what would you do?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I want to, I'm thinking of something I'll never forget about science, and that is what I learned from the Global Farmers Network about Norman Borlaug. And the most important thing for him was take science to the farmers. And so what I think every researcher has to make one pager for the farmer about his research. And doing research is one thing, but taking it to the farmer, you must never forget. And I think that's my most important message from a view of a farmer.
I think it's particularly relevant. Joanna, if you had control of the R&D budget, what would your top priority be?
So I don't mean to to cop out here, but I think the top priority is climate change and helping farmers, getting them the tools, the research, and whatever it is that they need to stay on top of it. I think that farmers have already been leading the way. Vermont farmers are a great example of speed in which they've adopted cover crops and no-till farming with respect to the rest of, and GMO crops as well. With respect to the rest of our country. But, we've got a tall task as farmers in delivering sustainable nutrition, and climate change is a challenge that's not going away, and it's making itself more and more present, with whether it's wildfires, an early killing frost, whatever the case may be. We've got to be able to react quickly so that we can ensure, like Julio said earlier, we're here for the long haul, and we want to make sure that we see it through.
Yeah, well, I think that's particularly relevant. And if it was up to me, I would pretty much echo a lot of your comments. The one thing I think is going to be a real challenge for the farming community is the level of data that we shall either have use or have access to, and how we can make the most of it. And I do think this is why, if I had a plea to those out there, is if we can do these things from a global perspective, we've more of a chance of learning more quickly and being able to apply it more evenly than we have in the past. And I shake these things. We live in a smartphone world now. They're connecting us all the time in ways we would never have imagined. And so there's a real opportunity from a farming level to learn. It picks up Annechien's point of take it to the farmer. It was really, I'm fortunate enough to have gone to Summit and seen the work that Norman Borlaug did, and it was quite incredible how quickly they could respond to the challenges out there. And I we haven't unfortunately time because we're getting to the end of this process. There's just a quick question I'd like your thoughts on. We actually haven't talked about food affordability. Is that part of farming's responsibility, Annechien?
Yes, of course. I think it's more governmental and a societal responsibility because, as Joanna said, and I liked it very much, the consumer is my boss. And well, of course, as farmers, we have to be sure that every consumer can buy their food, but we have to also be honest. At the moment, only 10% of the income is paid for food. So maybe consumers, they are used to very cheap food. Maybe they can pay a little bit more, or maybe it can go in another way. But it's responsible of all of us and not only from the farmer, because farmers also have to earn a good living and have to earn enough money too.
Okay, and Julio, as a last point, is that, is that something that you feel is a responsibility?
Oh, definitely, yeah. We must, as farmers, we must produce plentiful food, affordable food, and safe food. I mean, that's the 3 steps of production, the way I see it.
Okay, well, we're slowly but surely coming to the end of our time. Joanna, just one last point from you on that. How does that fit in your remit? Do you feel that responsibility to food affordability?
Yes, we do. I think, Julio captured it well. Plentiful food, affordable food, and safe food. I wrote it down, Julio. I love it. We're always, up for challenging ourselves in what ways we can do it better to make it more affordable. Certainly, this place where I live, we do have a lot of food insecurity, and food insecurity went up during the pandemic. And if we can do something to help, we should. Yeah.
I think that is a particularly good point to finish on. The responsibility of nutrition in the UK. It's been raised for a number of reasons through the coronavirus because of people's hardship and the requirement of food banks. Well, we've about reached the end of our time. I've found it a fascinating experience to be able to connect farmers from across the world. I hope the audience do. I would really please encourage any feedback that you can give us, because this is a new type of event. There are more planned. I think there's another 5 through the year. I would definitely encourage you to look up the various social media links of the participants and Global Farming Network. They're really good connectors. I'm genuinely, it's what I call the positive side of Twitter, when I can see what's happening across the world and ask questions instantly and find it basically by asking a farmer. From a personal point of view, and I'm sure the other participants would echo my words, I'd really like to thank the founders of the Global Farming Network for their vision, which was many years ago and way ahead of its time. And to me, it was a life-changing experience to be asked out to Des Moines to enjoy participating in the World Food Prize and what that entailed, and to sit around the round table with farmers from across the world. It genuinely allows you to open your eyes and make some great connections to what's actually happening out there. I'd certainly like to thank the USDA and the FAS in London for their support and encouragement, and the wider FAS community out there. And for all those that you won't see, but I know are working out there to keep the technology on track and us all to time. This is no mean feat, and believe you me, I shall sleep a little easier tonight now that this has passed through. And of course, the sponsors that have backed all of this. We will try and get any answers to the questions we haven't picked up through this. And on that note, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody, and thank you very much.